Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Burlington Board of Electric Commissioners. We meet every second Wednesday of the month, 5:30, right here at 585 Pine Street, if you can get here. As always, ratepayers, Burlingtonians are welcome to come down, share your thoughts with us, your concerns, whatever, and be a part of the conversation. Always welcome. All right, well, so we'll start off here with the agenda. First item on the agenda is the agenda. And do we have any changes or to the agenda this evening, or additions or anything like that? No? Are good? Okay, that's easy enough. Item number 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the October 25th meeting, barring any substantive, if there are any clerical errors, that can be directed towards the clerk, but are there any substantive changes to the minutes?
No, we don't have any.
All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make the motion to approve October 25th minutes of the meeting.
A motion has been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of October 25th, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are passed.
Should I abstain from that one? Sorry. 'Cause I was
Well,
not
you
a
weren't commissioner, yeah,
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have that noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But from here on in, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll go to item number 3, which is public forum. This is a time for any members of the public to, again, speak up, express your concerns or praise or whatever's going on. We don't have anybody here in the room. Do we have anybody online?
No.
Well, folks, nobody here this evening, but as I've already said, always welcome here, second Wednesday of the month, 585 Pine. Come on down, join the conversation. Moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, the Commissioner's Corner. This is an opportunity for commissioners to bring up anything that's been on their mind or since the last time we met or whatever. Have an open forum, basically.
No, I'm good.
Nothing? Right, we just met 2 weeks ago, so not a whole lot. Okay, we'll skip that. We'll go right, cruising right along here to item number 5, the General Manager update with General Manager Springer.
All right. Well, good to see you again so soon, and thanks for the meeting on the 25th. Welcome to Commissioner Anderson. We already missed Bob. Hopefully he'll join us again sometime in a public capacity. So a few items here in the report that I wanted to flag. This item about Act 44 and incentives is a little convoluted, but I'll just share that the upshot is we have a concern that some of our incentive programs may be disrupted or paused as early as December and potentially into January. So this really relates to the fact that we're at the end of a 3-year budget cycle. We had this pilot program that was authorized by the legislature that runs through the end of this calendar year. We have a new pilot program that continues that earlier pilot that runs for the next 3 years. What we don't have yet is a PUC order implementing the incentives for January. And we are starting to run low on our allowed levels for the current period. So Chris is monitoring those, and James and others. We're hopeful to be able to avoid disruption during this calendar year, either by kind of happenstance that we don't end up spending through because there may not be as much activity, or if we can somehow further complement our existing programs while we run them for the next month or so. We're working very hard with Efficiency Vermont, which is in the same boat essentially, to try to create a schedule that could be reviewed and approved by the Commission that would get us clarity for January. But I do want to flag for the Commission, it's been our tradition every January to kind of come out and say, here's our incentives for the year, here's our new incentives, here's our amended incentives. I don't think we're going to have that this January. I don't think we're going to have the regulatory clarity that we need. My hope is for the major programs, we'll basically continue them as we get into January. Our goal is to reconsider some of them. I'll give an example. With the heat pump incentives, we've been pretty generous on the capital side. You install a heat pump, you get several $1,000s back. Some cases with the low-income benefit, you can get up to 75%. We know the federal government's coming in with tax credits, rebates that are covering a real big portion of that. Our intent is to back off of some of our capital side incentives, and that aligns well with some of the process that's happening at the state level, and really try to find a way to support the operating costs, to do a peak rate or a peak bill credit or another type of program that says if you operate a heat pump and you allow us to reduce it a little bit during peak, we'll provide you a bill credit, for example, help make it cheaper to run or more competitive to run relative to fossil fuels. That type of change and other programs like our super user incentive for people who drive more miles to switch to an EV, I don't expect those January 1. That was our hope. I don't think it's going to happen. So I think we'll be looking at something like a late winter, early spring incentives announcement. And our goal between now and then is to try to keep things steady, because we know that if you disrupt the consumer marketplace with incentives, it's very, very negative for perception, for anyone who's going to purchase during that time, and just having stability there is really valuable. So I wanted to flag that. That was the first item in the report. We had a really nice event, despite some really terrible weather, at the solar test center at McNeil. We were able to energize that facility, officially cut the ribbon. It was raining. We had some good tents. Mike did a fantastic job of setting us up for the event despite the weather. Real kudos to James for a lot of work on this, the McNeil joint owners for their support. UVM's been a great partner. The McNeil team did a lot of work on this. So what we have now is, as you visit the Wastewood yard, you'll see the solar is set up. It's racked for 50 kilowatts of solar. We don't have quite that much there at the moment, but we've got 9 different types of panels, all of which are subject to research purposes, workforce training for University of Vermont. We had a student there who spoke about the benefit of having like a real world experience with solar as opposed to just learning about modeling in the lab. So they're going to be really operating, taking care of it. We expect some output. It'll maybe be like the equivalent of like 11 homes worth of electricity production, over the course of a year. That'll be split between the joint owners and BED financially. So it'll be a few $1,000s of benefit, nominally to the department, but really great partnership opportunity at McNeil. And obviously we're hopeful we'll be able to do district energy at McNeil. We're looking at this and whether we can build off of this. We'll look for other opportunities to do efficiency at McNeil, really try to focus on innovation as opposed to just conventional wood chip combustion, which certainly we do and we do well. But there may be opportunities to really utilize that site in creative and innovative ways, always with the full engagement of the joint owners. We're conscious that we own 50%. We're not the sole owner of the plant. So continuing to have that engagement will be critical. But this is a great project, great partnership. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to go visit it, I encourage you to do so. And we just had an interview here today with WPTZ, Stuart Ledbetter, on the subject that'll run over the next week or two, a little bit of a longer form interview. There was a lot of media coverage of the event. So turning to district energy, big night at City Council on November 20th. We have the carbon fee that we've been working on for a really long time, which would be the first application of carbon pricing anywhere in the state of Vermont, and took a charter change and 2 town meeting day votes, and really goes back to 2019, 2020, really back to the implementation of the roadmap. This was one of the policy initiatives. It's gone through 6 meetings of the TUC and Ordinance Committee, and it is now ready to be acted on at the City Council. So that's happening on the 20th. In addition, we have the district energy term sheets that were approved at the last commission meeting that have now been approved by the McNeil joint owners at their meeting on November 6th. Those are going along with franchise agreement and an easement for 99 Intervale Road as part of a package to the City Council on November 20th. I am certain that there will be some folks who are going to be vocally opposed to one or both of these items, and I appreciate that. I respect that. Our view is these would both be really significant steps relative to our roadmap. If our goal is to reduce fossil fuel use in the city of Burlington, both of these things get us a big chunk of the way there in ways that really other initiatives can't. So it could be a really significant night for us if we're able to advance those initiatives relative to our roadmap metrics. And then lastly, we are working, we're not quite there yet in terms of bringing it to the City Council, but we are working on a charter change proposal for next town meeting day. Our $5 million line of credit that we have not utilized counts towards our days cash on hand metric for Moody's. It has not grown commensurate with inflation or our budget or any other metric. It's been stagnant. It's in the city's charter that we can have $5 million for working capital for the department. We're working with the CAO and the city's bond counsel, Thomas Maloney, who you may remember, and our debt advisors at PFM to figure out if there is a way to put this on the ballot to look at probably doubling the line of credit amount, getting it more from 5 million to 10 million. We have no anticipation of needing to utilize it. It would be something we could draw on if we needed to, but I don't anticipate doing that in any foreseeable scenario. But it would support a stronger days cash on hand metric and put less pressure on us to raise rates to generate cash for that metric as part of our regular operating principles. So when we've looked out, and Emily can definitely touch on this more as we do the financials, both for fiscal 23 and for the current fiscal 24. When we look out and think about the sustainability of our financials over the next 3 to 5 years, this change, along with some second tranche of our revenue bond, net zero revenue bond, in an amount to be determined, are the two pieces that really help us, I think, when it comes to providing the cash and investment capital dollars that we need and supporting strong financial metrics while moderating rate pressure. We have no illusion that this does away with rate pressure, but keeping it as moderate as possible. So we're looking at all of those things, but in case you hear about that, that's something that we would bring to the Board of Finance before it goes to council, but would be something we'd be looking to have a vote on town meeting day. And obviously, if it's authorized for the ballot, we'll do what we always do in terms of trying to make sure Burlington voters understand what it is and what the implications of it are or are not. I don't know if it'll attract as much attention as other items that we've had, but you never know. That's what I've got.
Any questions?
No.
All right, hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6, the FY23 audited financials with Emily.
Thank you.
I also forgot to have Lori put them in the packet. You're just shaking it up a bit. Sorry, just shaking it up a bit. Thank you. Share my screen here, so folks at home can follow along. Okay, start. Okay, so FY23 results, here they are, audited. Audited statements were issued on Friday, October 20, was it the 7th? Yes, Friday, October 27th, meeting the 120 days following our fiscal year. That's the target set by our general bond resolution for the revenue bonds, so it's great that we made that date. And I want to acknowledge the accounting team. They did a great job this year preparing for the audit, working with the auditors, providing them all the information, preparing the statements. It was generally a really smooth year, and that's all credit to them for that. So this is, we'll start with the balance sheet in terms of context, particularly for Commissioner Anderson. We have kind of two sets of statements. One's for what's called the proprietary or enterprise fund. That's sort of BED without the EEU. And then as a result of a GASB standard change in FY21, we were required to produce separate fiduciary fund statements for the EEU activities. They used to be all bundled together. So now we present separately. So the EEU statements are not quite the same, you'll see, but they are separated. So these BED statements for the proprietary fund contain no, well, they do contain EEU activity, but the EEU is also stated separately as the fiduciary fund. So looking at the balance sheet, we always start with the assets. kind of highlights here. Capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation increased by just under $3 million, 2.897 million. It's about 3%. Largely that reflects the investments we've been making with the proceeds from the 2022A revenue bond. You can see that our current assets, our cash dropped by, sorry, let me find all my notes. Combination of things there. I'll go through the cash flow, but generally our expenses, our operating expenses grew more than our revenues grew. So our cash levels dropped, which for the, as you know, meeting to meeting, right? You've seen me report on cash, and that's been tight. But otherwise, current assets here went up a little bit, not a huge amount. Again, non-current assets, restricted deposits with bond trustees went down. That's largely the construction fund. We've been drawing that down as we've been spending on capital projects. Regulatory assets went up quite a lot, from 1.8 million to just over 6 million. Most of that is the new deferral of that lost winter energy revenue accounting treatment for which we got approval. That's a 4.2-ish million dollar regulatory asset that was posted. So that's the reason for that big increase there. Nothing big on the renewable energy standard inventory. Commissioner Anderson, for your benefit in particular, that is our bank, so to speak, of Tier 3 credits and Tier 1 RECs that we have available to use for compliance against Tier 1 of the Vermont Renewable Energy Standard. We changed from an all expense accounting to inventory-based accounting for Tier 1 RECs and Tier 3 credits last year. Equity interest, that's our Velco investment. That went up modestly. We did make an equity purchase in FY23. But you can see sort of total assets, there were some changes in current and non-current, but total assets are like just about the same at 185 million and 3/4 roughly. Going down to deferred outflows, the big one here is the middle one, pension amounts. You can see that went up a lot. That's pretty much all out of our control. That's a result of a report that the city's actuaries produce every year according to GASB standard 68. And generally that's like, those are the deferred inflows, but generally speaking, the whole pension plan for the city, the net pension plan liability went up a lot last year compared to the year before. And part of that is some changes in the expected return on investment rate that the pension board has kind of been putting into place over 5 years to make more conservative. So that's affecting the total pension liability. But then the net part of that is the plan's sort of net position, which is affected a lot by its investments. So as it happened, if you kind of do a chart of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, from July 1, 21 to June 30, 2022 was really good. And then from July 1, 22 to this June 30 was not good. So our pension liability dramatically decreased last fiscal year, and then it completely swung the other way for this fiscal year. So not only did it go up a lot, but the starting point was lower, if that makes sense, because it had decreased for FY22. So that's that's pretty much all of the change in the total deferred outflows. Now moving to the liability side of the balance sheet, total current liabilities dropped about 1.2 million. Most of that is like some timing of accounts payable at June 30. The rest of this is just the maturity schedules of our bonds overall. Same with the non-current liabilities, the revenue bonds and the DO bonds, those are based on the bond maturity schedules. There you can see the $10 million swing in net pension liability, a $10 million increase. So that is accounting for the bulk of the change in both total non-current liabilities and total liabilities. And then you can see again, pension amounts on deferred inflows changed by $6 million, under $6 million as well. So what does all that mean? If you look at the net position, little summary at the bottom, that's kind of taking the net of the assets and liabilities for all three of those captions right there. So net investment of capital in capital assets, asset side and liability side, which is the assets and the debt that funds those assets. Our position went up by $5 million from $40,686,000 to $45,408. And then you look at the restricted net deposits with bond trustees, that dropped a little bit, again, drawdowns. And then sort of all the other assets and liabilities netted together is the unrestricted. And you can see generally that declined, so our net position for unrestricted declined, but all totaled up, that's more than offset by the net investment in capital assets. So our total net position improved from $63.172 million to $64.811 million, and that's 2.6%. Questions on the balance sheet? Now we'll move to the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, better known as the income statement, or the P&L. Okay, so here, a couple things that this will be hopefully the most sort of familiar territory. It's the territory that we cover each month when we do the financial review. So you can see that sales increased from $48.9 million to $50.5 million. That's largely a result of the 3.95% rate increase that we put in effect in August 1st, 2022, recently approved by the PUC. Other revenues increased from $11.1 million to $12.4 million. That is largely actually program cost reimbursements from EEU. REC revenues are in there, but they are not contributing to the increase. They actually decreased slightly from 22 to 23. Not due to pricing, but due to volume of RECs available for sale. Due to, like as a result of production, renewable generation production. So you can see total operating revenues, net of our little uncollectible account provision, increased from $59.47 million to $62.816 million. Now we come down to the expense part of it. Production expenses, that's everything related to our generation assets, our 50% share of McNeil, the gas turbine, Winooski 1, our solar assets. So all of those expenses roll up in that production line. Those expenses increased by, oh, we don't have a percentage here, I'm sorry. From 11.329%, 11.329 million to 12.17 million. Hang on, if I find the right piece of paper, I do have a percent, which I find is more useful. Here we go. So that's 7.4% from 22 to 23. Purchased power, which includes our power contracts, capacity charges, and transmission, decreased from $14.745 million to $13.5 million. That is a decrease of just under 8%. that's a whole bunch of puts and takes in there, as you know. A lot of that was the amortization of that winter energy revenue shortfall. But also we received less production from Vermont Wind, but we had higher Mystic capacity charges and higher Hydro-Quebec charges as well. And then transmission costs in there also increased by just over $400,000. So lots of contributing factors in purchase power, but overall expenses decreased as a result of that accounting treatment. What is in other power supply? ISO New England administration charges. I think we can skip that. Transmission, oh, I just covered that. I misspoke. So transmission is separate. You can see that there, 8.9 up to 9.3 million. That's a 4.7% increase. Distribution are all of the expenses related to operation and maintenance of our distribution plant, streetlights, meters, overhead, underground, all of that. Those expenses actually decreased modestly from 3.3 million to 3.17 million. Customer accounting, service, and sales, those expenses increased quite a bit from just under 6 million to 7.7 million. Most of that was due to increased EEU program activity expenses. So as we saw up here in other revenues, so EEU both provides revenue and its expense. So they sort of net against each other in the operating, the BED fund, but they appear on the top and bottom of the income statement. Oops, sorry. Oh, went the wrong way. Okay. Administrative and general increased by quite a lot, 36.4 million. Most of that, however, is the pension expense adjustment that we took at the very end of the year. I looked through all the other captions, and they were pretty much the same as FY22, like nothing really to remark upon in the management disclosure. Depreciation increased modestly, about the same. Taxes about the same. So those were, I think, the really big highlights. Let me look down. Dividends are the dividends from our Velco investment. Interest income went up a lot because of interest rates. Grant income decreased just because of the timing of grants and what we apply for and what we receive. And our interest expense on debt went up just according to the bond interest schedules. So coming down here, you can see the increase in net position was, and that's basically the same as net income, 1.638 million compared to 1.9 million last year. And then that net position at the very bottom ties to the net position that we just discussed on the balance sheet. Questions on the income statement?
You did a very good job explaining this. I can actually follow along with this.
Good, great. Yeah. Sometimes I feel lost myself, so don't worry. All right, this one is the busiest, the cash flow. Oops. But it is understandable. So it's actually kind of looking at cash flows, you know, like from different perspectives. So the top little section is the cash flows from our operating activities, kind of the day-to-day stuff. So you can see that we got more cash from sales to customers, right? Because of that revenue increase, because of the rate increase we talked about. We got more cash from other revenues, mostly EEU, which we talked about. So a lot of these are translatable right back to the income statement that we just talked about. And then, from those cash inflows, you deduct all the payments made for the various operating activities that we have to fund. And so the most interesting thing is if you look at the net cash provided by operating activities, you can see in 2022 it was 8.616 million. 2023 was only 2.5 million. So even though, and we've talked about this, the accounting adjustment for the winter energy revenue shortfall makes our expenses less, but that doesn't make the cash inflow any greater, if you can follow me, right? Because we still received less cash revenue from winter energy sales, even though we are able to get accounting treatment to record less expense for that same period. And that, as you know, we've been talking about the cash position every month, and there you can see kind of at a comparative basis, the net cash provided in FY23 compared to FY22. And then the next little section is sort of your cash related to your capital expenses, your capital assets, your bonds, your borrowing, and all of that. And that one you can see the sign completely flipped from net cash in of 11.7 million to net cash out of 12.8. All of that is due to the construction fund from the 22 revenue bond flowing in FY22, and you can see only 5.65 million flowed in FY23 because we didn't do anywhere near the amount of new debt issuance, so that makes sense. Non-capital financing, that's the pilot basically, so that goes up as much as the payment in lieu of taxes does. Cash flows from investing, that's the amounts in the construction fund and a couple of our other investments that we have invested in T-bills, so this is kind of what happened with those, what did you deposit with the bond trustee in the construction fund, or what did you withdraw, what was your interest on those. So you can see that one had a big sign flip as well, because instead of depositing with the bond trustees, we were withdrawing. And so then these cash and cash equivalents at the beginning of the year, and the end of the year, these tie right back to the cash on the balance sheet. So it's sort of another way of getting to the cash that's on the balance sheet. And then the bottom is just really a reconciliation, which I won't, it's sort of like, check your math, that that all of these things tie out. So I won't walk you through that. Questions on cash flow? And then we'll briefly go over the EEU statements. As I said, they look quite a bit different. So for the EEU, it's a very simple statement of net position, simple balance sheet, assets, liabilities. As we've just discussed, EEU spending was up a lot in FY23, so you can see that reflected in the lower cash balance. The cash changed from 3.7 to 1.8 million. AR is about the same, the AP, is just timing. So really, most of the news story here is the decrease in cash related to increased EEU program expenditures. And then the final page is kind of a simple income statement for the EEU. So here you can see the energy efficiency charge collections from customers, the revenue we get from the forward capacity market, and the regional greenhouse gas initiative for efficiency savings. So overall, total additions decreased by about $500,000, most of that due to a lower EEC charge. And then you can see payments for programs jumped, as we've been talking about, and the rest of it's pretty small potatoes and not a lot of change from year to year. So that's what I had on the walkthrough of FY23. Any questions on that?
Anyone? No?
No, that was
Questions, well done.
very,
Yeah.
very thorough and
understandable one.
Okay.
We'll move on to number 7, the September FY '24 financials.
Okay, great. Let me pull up my notes on these. I can see everything. Okay. So September FY '24, yes. Okay, so in September, this is a little small, but our net income was $539,000 compared to a budgeted net loss of $482,000. So we did quite a bit better than budget by just over $1 million. Reasons for that are essentially like 3 big ones. First one is sales to customers was higher than budget by $216,000. Both residential and commercial sales were up. Other revenues were down. Most of that was EEU. It wasn't direct delivery month. The second big reason was power supply expense. Net power supply expense was favorable to budget by $454,000. Number of reasons contributing to that. Fuel was favorable by $283,000. So McNeil ran a little bit at the beginning of September when it was hot, and then was offline the rest of the month essentially for a fall maintenance outage. So we saved on fuel compared to budget. Transmission expense was also favorable by $125,000. Most of that due to cool weather in August, which meant that the peak load was lower, and that affects the transmission rate for the September period. And then we also had a minor favorable variance in purchased power. We had lower wind production, which created savings, but less McNeil and less wind production also meant that we had higher ISO exchange expenses than budgeted.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Yeah.
You said the three factors. The middle factor, is there a?
So the first factor was sales.
Yep.
Second factor is power supply, and then I haven't gotten to the third one yet.
Okay, you said that, okay, so it was a component of sales, I think. Oh, you said there's a component of sales that was down, I think maybe it was the EEU?
Oh, that's, other revenues. Yeah, sorry. I
No,
mentioned
okay.
3 things so far, but only 2 of them were the big 3.
Is there a why for the down, and is it just blips or changes in activity, or?
Yeah, EU is kind of driven by what customers are up to,
Okay.
right? Like what
That's-
are building owners doing, what are homeowners doing
Sure.
with appliance replacements or heat pumps or whatever.
I just didn't know if there was like a
Yeah,
grand why or
I don't,
normal fluctuation. Great, okay.
not that I know of, yeah. Not one of the big 3 was sort of everything else that's operating expense. That was only $106,000 worse than budget, which in that line is not a lot of variance. And the third big reason for the better than budget performance was in other income and deductions, where you can see the $606,000 favorable variance. Most of that is grant revenue that we received for the electric bucket truck being recorded in September. So those are the big contributors to the $1 million favorable variance. So year to date, we're at a net income of about $2.6 million compared to a budgeted net income of $900,000. So that's 1.674 better than budget. I'll say at this point that as of Q1, things look good. But I do want to give you a heads up that we're continuing to forecast, and we've got some concerning things in the forecast, mostly in the power supply area. Energy forwards are down, which is bad for us because we're assuming excess energy to sell in the winter. We're projecting about a $1.4 million more expense in purchase power for the remainder of the year. Hydro-Quebec prices are linked to the forwards, so that we've got a little bit of an offset, and that the HQ price is down, but that's nothing compared to the $1.4 million projection at this point. And then we're also projecting $815,000 less in rec revenue for the remainder of the fiscal year because of the lower wind production, lower McNeil production that we've seen sort of earlier in the calendar year. So things are good at this point, but we are pretty cautious going into the winter. A lot of it will, as it always does, depend on those winter energy prices.
Do those unpredictable, dang mystic payments come into that? you
So
never
we
know if it's-
budgeted for them
yeah.
this year, which we hadn't been able to in FY '23, because we didn't know about it. I think, trying to think about the forecast, I think like month to month, we sort of budgeted a flat rate for Mystic, but in actuality, like, it goes up and down
Yeah,
depending
wild
on
swings.
sort of loads in New England. So some months we're worse off, like September, I know the Mystic charge was actually better than we had budgeted, but that's not gonna always be the case. And I think, I don't remember if,
Yeah, the
do you remember,
betterment,
James?
there was a short-term betterment, but if you look back to the history of Mystic, we're not ready to say that it's gonna be better for the year than we projected, if you will. So
feel
like you
like-
say, it's month-to-month variation and not yet any kind of vision that it's gonna be cheaper than we thought for the year, for the fiscal year.
We just wanted to say that we, because it seems like we got caught with our.
Yeah, I think
Bridges
we're
down.
forecasting it to be a little bit higher than we've budgeted, but I mean a little bit, like 100,000 or less
Yeah,
more
this is
than
not
we
the same
budgeted.
situation as prevailed last year, where we didn't know it was going on and therefore had zero in for it. Now we're looking at the difference between what we projected and what it's gonna come in at, and that's looking to be relatively small. Again, like I say, briefly, I thought maybe we could forecast a reduction. I think that's premature.
Yeah, good.
Thank you, James. Other questions on kind of the operating statement, the income statement?
No?
Okay, let's go down to capital spending through September. In September, we spent 1.467 million compared to our budget of 2.3. We're about 13% through the capital budget for the entire year. The general line, which was overinflated previously for the bucket truck, is now kind of the net correct amount, so that amount's sort of back in line with where it should be. Most of the variance here is in production, I think timing of McNeil projects. And then moving down to cash, we had, as of September 30th, 8.893 million in the operating cash. That compares favorably, I'm happy to say, to our budgeted cash number of about 8.5 million. So as I said last month, that reflects the bucket truck grant and the $3 million GO issuance that both occurred in September. And, the higher sales and the reduced expenses, right, that we just discussed. So that brings us to a 12 months ended debt service coverage ratio of 4.39, adjusted debt service coverage 1.45, and 135 days cash on hand. That concludes
That's
my
a much
report.
more normal looking graph right there.
Yeah.
It's a little high at the moment relative to kind of what we project might ultimately
Yeah.
be, just to set fair expectation.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're delighted to see those numbers.
Yeah. I did want to just mention kind of one other thing to preview. We had discussed, we are already starting to plan for the FY25 budget season. And I did a presentation for employees kind of on sort of BED's sort of budget 101. Obviously, I know you all have been through the budget several times, except for Commissioner Anderson, but you have lots of budget experience. But I was proposing to give you a version of that presentation because I did some stuff where I looked at historical trends which I think could be interesting as we kind of head into the budget discussion for FY25. So I'll figure out with Darren the best month. I was thinking maybe in January when we do our budget kickoff, but we'll try to fit it in on an agenda when there's not too much other stuff. So just wanted to preview that.
Any questions for Emily?
No?
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. That moves us on to agenda item number 8, the SCADA OMS DMS project overview with Munir. Feel free to explain any and all acronyms.
Paul's getting ready.
Oh, a second, I'm trying to get this. There it is, now it's working. All right, good evening. My name is Munir Kasti. I'm the manager for utility services and engineering, and I'm gonna go over one of our fiscal year 24 projects, the Advanced Distribution Management System project. This is really three phases projects, which will include a new supervisory control and data acquisition system, which is called SCADA, plus an outage management system, plus a distribution management system. The supervisory control and data acquisition system, what's the SCADA? What the function of the SCADA system? It really provides real-time monitoring and control of the electric distribution system for our system operators. We have over 200 devices in the field that are controlled by the SCADA system, and this would allow our system operators to control the electrical distribution systems remotely without the need to dispatch our line crews. So technically, they can open any breakers, devices in the field from our control center and sectionalize the outage. The current SCADA systems that we have was purchased over 10 years ago. It was last upgraded in year 2016, and is considered past its end of life. And we have currently very limited vendor support through March 2024.
It's hard to believe, right? It just
Yeah.
seems like yesterday.
Yes, we did that,
Yeah.
yep. So in April 2023, BED put out a request for a proposal for a new advanced distribution management system, an ADMS. This new ADMS will have many of the same SCADA functions as our legacy system, along with new enhancements of an outage management system, an OMS, and a distribution management DMS. This functionality will enhance system operation while providing better reliability and power quality for our customers. The outage management system, or the OMS, will provide BED with the following functions. Outage locations. The system will leverage advanced metering infrastructure, the AMI system, the customer information system, CIS, interactive voice response, the IVR, and all the SCADA connected field devices to provide the location where the fault is, or the abnormal condition on our system. There will be a new customer outage portal, a new website that will provide customers with outage locations as well as estimated time of restorations that we currently don't have. and the mobile crew management, which provide us with a real-time location of our crews to optimize workflow as well as outage restorations. As for customer call handling, the system will leverage the IVR to manage the large volume of outage calls and provide B&E customer care team with a web-based interface to record the outage calls and create outage tickets. Outage notifications, customer outage notifications, emails and/or text messages alert will be emailed to customers affected by outages. The last part of this project will be the distribution management system, or the DMS. And this is mostly for the enhancements of our reliability and provide our system operators really with a tool for them to be trained. You know, they can simulate outages on our system and get trained on how to restore services. So we'll have we'll obtain train simulator for our system operator, and then the neat function, which the most important function I believe, is the automatic fault location, isolation, and service restoration, which is basically the system by itself will isolate the outage and restore service to most of the customers that are not impacted by the outage, and all this will happen automatically without our system operator. And then the benefit will be the distribution system optimizations tools for voltage and power quality would be able to really adjust the voltages based on the MI informations for voltage that we can obtain and we have interface with. So we don't have to run for the whole year, for instance, the distribution system at its highest voltage. So we can, that will be optimized based on the lowest voltage in the end of the feeders. And just as a note, obviously, when we talk about automations, it's not going to happen overnight. The recommended approach is basically to run it in advisory mode for like a year to two, to trust it and make sure you have run through all the possible scenarios. So basically, it will provide the dispatcher with this is how you should isolate and restore the system, in writing step by step, and they will review it, and if everything is correct, they will implement it. And after like year to two, everybody, if we believe everything is worked out, and if it's working the way we want it, then we'll switch it to the automation mode.
Have we chosen a vendor yet? I mean, I know you said you have.
We are in the
an
process.
RFP, but,
Yeah. We are in the process of that. The project timelines. We're right now we're targeting to come back on December 11 for presenting the vendor selection, as well as for your recommendation of contract terms to the City Council. The phase one, it's going to be the SCADA implementations, and we hope to have that implemented by this late winter spring of fiscal year 24. And along with that, we're going to have we're going to install a new SCADA video wall, and that one will be in the new and will be installed in the new dispatch area, which is the former auditorium. Right now, it's under really constructions to accommodate the new dispatch center will be in this room behind you. And then the phase 2 and phase 3 will be happening, which are the DMS and OMS, will be happening in fiscal year 25-26.
So Manera, are you looking to change a lot of the switches, or can they be retrofitted?
Nope, we're not changing anything.
Nothing?
No switches in the field. No.
Good.
So, any
That doesn't, I was gonna say that it doesn't involve some sort of new equipment that will do exactly what you're.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Or
we're
it's-
gonna have really new software system here installed in the control room,
Yeah.
new servers.
It's a big ask.
I have a question which I don't know is necessarily embedded in this process or in this RFP or what you're looking for, but I'm just curious if there is a connection. So, as you're talking about these outages and thinking about outages and isolating them, and is there any, I'm thinking about resilience, I'm thinking about like community resilience, I'm thinking about different customers and being able to identify, let's make things up, like fire stations versus non-occupied office building. Like, is there some of that, does the system as it starts to isolate or show you more, is that something you don't already have and it's gonna provide, or is that something that's completely different?
Right now,
I'm
we
sorry
have.
about the ignorance of
Yeah,
not
I mean,
knowing
right
this.
now, all this, we have it in really, in a procedure, step-by-step procedure.
Yeah.
If we have an outage here, this is what you do.
Got
For
it.
our system operators, they follow that.
Got it.
So we're gonna take all this and try to input it into the new system. So the system by itself, based on the information they receive from the MI, from the CIS,
Yep.
from the phone calls, they will locate the fault, and then based on how we restore the system, they will implement that automatically.
Got it, so you're gonna give it kind of that intellect of like, what is the preferred paths within, and then
Yes.
hopefully it can be smart enough to.
And how much, you can put on this device for power.
Yep, got it, okay,
Because
thanks.
there's limitations on how much you can put.
Other questions?
Sounds exciting.
Sounds like a very ambitious project, and I'm looking forward to watching it come through. If any of you get a chance, you gotta check out the SCADA wall, it's really cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, and also I forgot to mention, this is really cross-departmental team projects. We got employee from engineering, dispatch, customer care, IT, they're all involved in this project.
Good. Fantastic, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the
I'm actually, you may hate this one, I'm sorry. But having been through situations like this myself, if you're coming up to end of life on your software and it's gonna take a while for this implementation to be like set, do you have backup plans for
Well,
contingency plans?
yes,
Or-
basically, the critical path is phase one, which is gonna be done, we're hoping that to get it done before our maintenance support ends.
Great, thank you.
Question. Any others?
No.
Thanks, Manir.
All right, thank you.
Really cool.
Thank you.
All right, on to agenda topic number 9, the one we've all been waiting for.
Only comes once a year. It's always a big moment.
Well, it's a big moment
He's got 5 minutes.
for your viewing pleasure.
The clock doesn't start till I get my screen up.
Oh, come on, Paul.
BD 2023 property, and, okay, I'm not sure what B&M means, renewal, discussion and vote. With Bob.
Boiler and machinery.
Boiler and machinery.
Thank
yes.
you. Yeah, that acronym can be tricky, so. Okay, good evening, all. Thank you for that intro. I think you've all been through this before, except Commissioner Anderson, so. I had heard earlier today that the eBay tickets were going like $300 a piece. That might have changed since the last couple hours, but. So this is the annual property boiler machinery. It's the beast of our insurance line, so. I come in front of you for a couple reasons. One, legal had weighed in a couple years ago because it spans over 2 fiscal years, so it's one reason. And just the magnitude of the dollar amount, I think that it's just due diligence to come in front of you. But even though it's a budgeted line item and it's been adopted, I think it's only right. So that's why you see me once a year here for this talk. So just the timing, sometimes the Electric Commission, depending on when the meetings fall, in this case, you're first up. So I will be asking for, again, this is a not to exceed amount, the final amount, this is common. This line renews on November 20th. And so the underwriters for the other carriers take you right to the last day typically, or right up to it. So today I'm going to present the not to exceed amount, and then next Monday night, the Board of Finance. And then on 20th, typically it's a consent agenda on November 20th. So that's how those three will line up in order. So let's see, the recommendation here is tonight asking for you to renew our property boiler machinery insurance or approve it. We have 4 carriers. This line is so large. Typically you have one insurance carrier writing one line of business. This is our 22nd year with AIG or AIG supported with Zurich, StarTech, and Aegis. So it runs from November 20th of 23 through 24. And again, I mentioned a not to exceed premium of $778, $683, and $70. So That is a large number, okay? Again, repeating what you probably heard before, what's covered, it's the tangible assets, things you can put your hands on, physical assets, so, and it covers perils, fire, lightning, smoke, explosions, fire, of course, being our biggest concern, particularly with the McNeil Station. Inside and outside property, furniture, computers, and so on. The things that it typically doesn't cover are what we call T&D, transmission, distribution, poles, overhead lines, underground lines. That's common not just for us, but any utility, particularly in the Northeast, because of snow loads and winter weather and stuff. So, like I mentioned, our current status is with those 4 carriers, they write on equal paper, if you will, and they have what's called a pro quota share. They share in the losses and share in the premiums. But in general, we consider it's on AIG paper. It's expiring, like I said, November 20th. We currently pay annual premiums a little over $683,000.
What's the new one?
Pardon?
683 to what, go back to what the?
Yep, a little over 778. Yes, it's huge. What's in your handouts, and I'm not gonna cover all of them today unless you have specific questions, but Hickok and Boardman, as you know, is our insurance agent, and they represent the city too in many lines, including workers' comp and auto. We're on this particular line with them. I have the BD Property Building Machinery. There's a 2-tabbed Excel exhibit that talks about the history of this line all the way back for the last 22, 23 years. If you've looked at that, it's quite a spike in 2019. That's when we went from the mid 200,000s to the upper 500,000s and so on. So that's where we are today, a significant increase, almost exponential. The third item in your handout was Hickok and Boardman, again, that structure chart, we call it the pro quota share program, that shows the 4 carriers and their assets and their shares of those losses. And the last thing is the cover letter, which I'll cover bits and pieces of that today from myself to you all. Points of interest. So our insurance agent, Hickok and Boardman, through Paul Plunkett and Amy Merritt, have worked diligently with those existing 4 carriers. This starts about a day after we renew, and it takes quite a while to negotiate these terms and conditions. They're still in negotiations, which is normal with them to finalize capacity. That's the largest amount that an insurance company is willing to write. And our total insurable values, how much property we have to insure, deductibles and premiums. And so there's a lot of things on the table that we're looking at to increase or decrease, trying to keep that premium down at the same time offer coverage. Just pure numbers, be remiss if I didn't mention it. So this premium increasing from last year's amount from 683, if you will, to a not to exceed, to emphasize that, 778 million, which is 6.4% higher than we had estimated at renewal on 11/20 in our fiscal 20-year budget.
778,000.
1,000, those are saying.
Yeah, did I say that?
You said million.
Oh, yeah, sorry, 77. It's bad, but it's not that bad yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So through our insurance agent, there's a possibility, again, of achieving a lower renewal premium. It won't be a lot. I'm going to sit here and pretend to guess at it, but I've asked Paul to maybe quantify that. If I had to guess, just sitting here, maybe 20 to 30,000, another decrease, but it's not going to go down by 100,000. Using deductible options and last-minute pricing still to be finalized. So similar to last year, the total amount of property that's on our policy will be capped at 175 million versus our current fully scheduled TIV, if you will, of a little over 319 million. So a good question to ask, and I think some people have asked tonight. So why are we increasing if the total amount's capped? Because it's pure exposure loss, pure statistics, probability. If you have 10 locations and you're insuring $400 million of property versus 200 million, but each of them are capped, you're still going to see it's an increased exposure to those underwriters and insurance companies. So you can expect to see your premiums go up. Our TIV, our total insurable value, went up by 21% this year. So that's why that, as alarming as this is, quite honestly, I thought it was going to be worse. So if there was no rate increase, the insurance companies, which there wasn't, they had flat increases. We had our total insurable value went up by 21%, even though it was capped. But that exposure, that risk to those underwriters and those, there's a lot of property out there, and you could have losses at multiple locations and so on. So,
How is that determined?
pardon?
Who determines you said the value of the property went up 21%.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that comes every year from our finance department. So they're tracking, if you remember the little blue stickers, Jim remembers in his time, but it's beyond computers and desks and filing cabinets. So that all rolled up into one big number, and I get those every year. typically between April and June from Emily's group. That's how that's a real number, so it's not just made up, it's everything. The insurance companies need to know that in case you had a total loss, so.
Yeah.
Okay, considerations from Hickok and Boardman. I think that's a fair question, saying as we see these go up, what are we doing to try to reel this in or mitigate it? So, bullet item 1, continued diligence with our current carriers, those 4 that are writing it right now, towards increasing their capacity, meaning can you write a little bit more while, of course, lowering the rate, especially as it relates to McNeil assets. So McNeil Station, of course, is a higher risk, much different than the building we're sitting in here. So that, of course, makes up a large percentage of our premium. Another thing, they've been looking at this for a while, but again, a little more seriously now, separating BDs, we, the city, Beth knows this, Commissioner Anderson, excuse me, separating BDs, auto and workers' comp from the city's program. So as long as it doesn't hurt either entity, those are similar exposures. We share the same auto policy with the police department and so on. So they're looking into that. Ours renews 7/1, the city's has a 12/31, so it helps have the same broker work those. So we're looking into that. What we've really done, and kudos to Muneer and particularly Paul Pickna, if he's still here, and his crew, Rodney Dollar, we spent a lot of time looking at captives. If you don't know much about Vermont, it used to be 3rd in the world for the captive market. Bermuda, Cayman Islands, and right here, Vermont Captive Insurance Association, the VCIA, they do a lot with the captives. This year, we've moved to number 1, so that's significant, little tiny Vermont. It goes all the way back to Howard Dean days, so we're looking at that because people say, well, you're in Vermont, why aren't you at least exploring a captive? And so we are working hard with Hickok and Boardman, with FM Global. There's 2 different types. There's many different types of captives, but FM Global did give us a quote for what they call a guaranteed cost program. That's basically our current insurance we have now. That's just traditional insurance. That came in at $973,285. That's 25% higher than our not-to-exceed quote. So just to give you an idea, there's not a lot of players in the world and in our market, and so that's a really good quote. On the flip side, they have a captive program. Those numbers are forthcoming. That could be, down the road, months or even a year down the road, but we're looking into that, into what we call rent-a-captive, which is sort of like the building block of a captive program. You can go then to a single cell captive and on and on. There's numerous types of captives where basically you insure your parent company and you're basically sharing those losses. You just set aside a little bit of your premium, and over time with no losses, which we haven't had any in a long time, you can build some equity and save some money. So I tell the analogy of like, bless you, of renting or buying a house. So why do people, if you're renting over and over for 30 years, it's not throwing money away, why not buy a house? But if you can't afford that house, you're gonna rent for a while. And so that's a very quick analogy of captive. Okay, back to my slides. I'm looking at Lori. We're examining, like I mentioned, the possibility of a single cell captive in addition to FM Global. I won't name them, but another company we reached out to, and that quote was just, it was out of the market. So minimum premium of $1 million and so on. So we didn't go down that path very long. Some of the things I talked about, you can always, just like your homeowners, your auto, you can consider increasing your existing deductibles. We're looking into that. McNeil from $1 million to $2 million, and the gas turbine from $550,000 up to $1 million. I think that's a typo on my point. I think it should say 500,000. So those are some of the things we do. You would never want to raise your deductible like to $5 million, but at some point there's a break-even point where if you save enough premium, it's worth increasing those. And we've also asked the current carriers to increase the cap that we've talked about already from 175 million to 200 million, especially given, as I mentioned before, the total insurable value growth of a little over 23% of McNeil. So the rest is just numbers, and soon I'll get to the resolution. I mentioned before that our fiscal 20-year budgeted amount of 711, there's again a typo, 711,410, produced in February 23. So we do the budgets in January or February, and the line renews on November 20th. So if you can picture, we've got 4 or 5 months, 5 months at one amount from July to November or so, and then the remaining year. So your annual budget's made up of 2 different insurance policies, if you will, to make up that amount. So we saw, again, big numbers, that this not-to-exceed premium I'm asking you to approve tonight of $778,683 would amount to a 6.4% change in our estimated renewal premium that I guessed back in January, working with the broker, or a 13.9% increase over our expiring premium. Okay, and the last point is the amount that I put in. We put in a 3% 2% increase in our total insurable value, and a 5%, we had guessed at 5% Hickok and Boardman back in January of this particular line. So when you add those together, I say only amounts to a 3.85% increase in our, right now as we stand in our fiscal '24 budget on this light item. So percentage-wise, not a lot. Premium, it's still like around 90,000. It's a big ticket item. And below here, I've got your motion, but I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Let the record show 11 minutes, 45 seconds.
That's as fast as I can do it. I've got binders. of
We got a
backup.
timer right here.
A bunch of backup slides. I'd love to share them, but. Questions?
Questions?
No?
Really? I was
Sound good.
expecting you to-
I've worked with him on insurance before. I'm happy to listen.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson.
Is always very thorough and due diligence, Paul. Appreciate all your work. And Paul up the road. He does a lot of good work for us. Again, any questions? If not, then I'll entertain a motion, if the so desired.
I can't see the screen, so someone of you guys are gonna have to pick it up. Even with our glasses, I won't be able to read it.
I think I
You
can,
may do it, I'll do
I
it.
think I can read it. I make a motion to recommend to the city council that Darren Springer, BED general manager, or his designees authorized to renew BED's property B&M insurance for the period of November 20th, 2023 through November 20th, 2024, with a not-to-exceed premium of $778,683.70 as outlined in this memo, subject to review and approval of the city attorney's office and the Board of Finance and the city council.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Motion and seconded. Discussion on the motion.
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Good job, Paul.
Very good work, as always.
Just a couple.
That brings us to item number 10, which again is another opportunity for commissioners post-meeting to any last-minute thoughts or ideas or things you want to bring up. Other than, welcome Commissioner Anderson. Anything?
Could I reference one thing? I know
Sure.
it's not technically the right moment,
Yeah,
but
no, go ahead.
it's in the report, but it's kind of buried, and it's actually fairly significant. I don't know that we've touched on it fully. BED was awarded a significant DOE grant, Department of Energy. We have it here. It's called the Building Giants, which has an acronym of Building Grid Edge Integration and Aggregation Network of Thermal Storage. Great acronym. But really, it's a grant. Is it 1.2 million roughly? Yep. So where we are able to use it to enable a lot of end-use devices, like we think about the heat pump pilot program that we're doing right now with Sensibo devices, for example. This could really enable this in kind of a much bigger way, and not only in the heat pump context, but in other contexts. So I see James on the screen. His team was the lead in working on this grant with finance and with others, and I think we were the only entity in the state of Vermont that received one of these grants this round. It was a very competitive process. So I probably should have elevated that to the top of the report, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to flag it. And James maybe has a comment or two as well.
Oh, just that Freddie and Emily did an awful lot of the work on the pre and post too. So again, I want to say that, but it's a 1.2 million, but it is a match. So that is the actual grant portion is 1.2. The project is more like 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty good sized project. And yes, we were the only entity of all of the Vermont utilities that did get an award under that grant offering. They're all jealous.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Thank you, Freddie.
All right.
That's good news. Anything else? Going once, going twice? I'll entertain a motion.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor of adjourning? Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.